Welcome to The Backstory, a program from the North Dakota News Cooperative that takes an in-depth look at the stories we're reporting for you. I'm Sabrina Halvorson, CEO of the North Dakota News Cooperative. Joining me is Michael Standaert, our lead reporter. Michael, this story that we're talking about was headlined Project to Position Minot as a Significant Cog in the U.S. Steel Supply Chain. Now, this article was completely new to me. And a lot of times we write about things that I have a little bit of knowledge in, but I can tell you what, I know nothing about pig iron. I knew nothing about pig iron until you wrote this, and I had to research a little myself just to understand. Let's start off with just explaining that, if you don't mind. What is pig iron, and why is it so important to the U.S. steel industry?
So pig iron is kind of a kind of pelletized raw iron that's made from the ore, and then that is sent to steel companies, and the steel companies can make that into steel. The purer, the better. Much of the iron ore that had been used in the U.S. has traditionally come from northern Minnesota. There's some mines there still operating. We saw one when I was out there, but a lot of them were mined out of the purest iron over a century of mining. And there's these, huge pits that are now, big lakes up there, and then huge discarded piles of iron ore that's a lot less pure. It's like 20, 30, maybe 40% at the highest. And that's kind of what we're looking at here with this story.
As you kind of mentioned just now, but this project that you wrote about, this is connecting this discarded iron ore from northern Minnesota with a new processing facility in Minot, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
So
how does that work?
Okay, so over the years of mining that happened there, they piled these huge mounds or even mountains. They're quite large of the discarded iron ore near Calumet, Hibbing. This is the area I was at, and this is where this company, North American Iron, has been founded, and they will take reclaim the iron ore that's already on top of the ground, and they will ship it by rail to Minot. And this new facility that will be built starting next year and should be finished by 2029 will process that ore into the pig iron kind of nuggets. And then that pig iron will be sent out to steel companies around the Midwest, around the country, to make steel. So there's all this discarded iron that, people there haven't really had an idea what to do with. I mean, in other countries, iron ore of that purity has often been processed, with the aggregate rock that's stripped away, used for something else, and then the more pure iron ore being used to make steel. That hadn't really been done here as much as it had been in other countries, and some other countries had over time kind of perfected how to do that, and some of the technologies and kind of ways to do that are going to be adopted with this facility in Minot. And this would be the first, pig iron processing facility in the U.S. for decades. Right now, 100% of the pig iron that's used in the U.S. now is imported. And one of the reasons for Jim Bogalis to start this project has been, okay, the tariffs in 2017 on steel kind of raised costs for a lot of the companies here for making steel, and they didn't have a pig iron facility to pull from here in domestically. Another part of that is that most of the pig iron was coming from Russia and Ukraine,
Mm.
and then the conflict there disrupted that, and then it shifted to, okay, 75% is coming from Brazil. Okay, what happens if there's issues with that? So this was kind of the way into coming up with this concept and trying to initiate it. And I think it's going to be a pretty big project for both northeastern Minnesota and Minot as well. From what I understand, there'll be about 150 jobs at the first processing area there in Calumet, Hibbing area. So they'll take some of the rock and they'll do some minor processing there, and then they'll send it off on these rail cars to Minot, where it will, I think they're going to send it 9 months of the year. There's, from what I understand, that didn't make into the story, but there's some times of the year that they're not going to be able to go up there. It's going to be too cold and too
Mm.
snowy. So they're going to try to send it to Minot over that 6 to 9 months. And then there'll be a lot kind of laying out there, being waiting to be processed. And one question I had about that was, okay, it's very windy in North Dakota, and this iron rock is kind of rusty and dusty, is that gonna blow a lot of dust off? And so they said there's gonna be this spray kind of coating. It's like almost like plastic, but it's not plastic. It's kind of like a biological coating that's sprayed on the iron ore when it's laying out there. So there'll be minimal, if any dust blowing off that. But it's a fascinating project, and here in North Dakota. In Minot, there will be 650 direct high paying jobs with that. So I think 150 of those were going to be at the power plant part of that facility, and the rest will be at the processing part of the facility. And then just during the construction phase, there'll be 4,000, 3,000, 4,000 construction jobs available just for that part of the project. And then kind of hearing, they did a study with Deloitte. I wasn't able to see the full study. I was able to get a little bit more information about it, but just the other jobs associated with that many people getting that level of employment, this kind of activity in that area would lead to nearly 1,500 more jobs in the community and around the state. So I think it's a big win for Minot from all accounts. If it all does go through, it looks like it's going through. So
Yeah, that was something that I wanted to talk about was the economic impact that this would have for Minot and the surrounding area. I didn't realize it was going to be that many jobs, but that's a huge number of jobs to be bringing into that area, which means
yeah,
people coming in and then having more people in the area is going to, that's going to help businesses in the area. It'll help restaurants and grocery stores and housing. And speaking of housing, do
yep.
they have a lot of housing in the area available or?
So that was one of my questions. The EDC up there, the EDC people were saying that there should be enough. There's new houses going in right now. There's a couple new apartment buildings going in. The company is also speaking with some developers as well to see if okay, how do you manage this if there is that huge number of jobs and people can't actually find a place to live? So they're discussing that with developers and kind of making sure that the supply will keep up with demand.
So it almost brings to mind to me kind of like the Williston area and with the oil boom and bringing in oil workers and things and housing had to be created there, but it did bring in a lot of money into the area. Do you kind of feel like it's going to be the same thing for Minot? Is the
Not
pig iron boon?
well. I don't. I mean, they were saying that there won't be anything like a man camp or man camps. I mean, maybe with the construction, I don't know how that. Usually with construction, that kind of happens anyway. The hotels might fill up or that sort of thing. But they said, there's enough supply apparently for housing at this moment and planned building that should be enough. And as with this, 2 or 3 years before the actual facility is built, having that time to kind of plan and get things in, I think will help.
Yeah. Why was Minot chosen? And I'm looking at the picture here in the article, and I can see that this is like it's a big facility, and this is a lot of acres of land. And I'm wondering if that's one of the reasons. In fact, 2,400 acres it says here. So is that one of the reasons that Minot was selected for this, or were there other reasons, or do you know?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons that they have this large area out to the northeast side of town, kind of north of the airport there. That's been set aside for development for years now. That they've been trying to fill up, and I think this will be kind of one of the crown jewels of that. Another thing was that Jim Bogalis talked about was the regulatory environment is very good for doing something like this in North Dakota and not necessarily in Minnesota. It's very difficult to get permitting for things like this
Hmm.
for new mining and things like that in North Dakota or in Minnesota. It can be very, very difficult as well. But since they're just kind of reclaiming this ore from the top, they were able to get through that process very, very quickly in Minnesota, and Minnesota is going along with fixing up that area. There's all these old. I was out on the site and there's all these old facilities that are like rusting and falling down that were left when the mine closed, that Hill Annex mine closed in 1978. And it's interesting, there was a car, like a rail car, full of ore below one of the belts, I guess one of the chutes where the ore came out. It was totally full, and that chute still had ore in it. So they basically just
Huh.
shut everything off and left when it closed down. And out of that ore, there were trees growing out of the ore in that rail car. So
Really?
that area had been a state park or a local state or local park for a long time now, but it had been falling into disrepair as well. And I think they're happy to kind of get some of those things out of there because they were attracting kind of vagrants and people just going and breaking things and doing other kind of things in these abandoned buildings. So
Yeah,
they
that's
want
unfortunate.
to clear them out. And this would be good for that area too, as well. I mean, not just Minot, but good for the Hibbing and Calumet area there. I mean,
Mhm.
it's seen better times, back in the World War II days and then up into the 70s. It was a pretty, prosperous blue collar area where you had these mines that were basically providing those communities with jobs. So, once those kind of went away, the poverty rate has increased and people have moved away. So, Jim Bogalis is from that area, and that's kind of one of his things. He's like, kind of wants to do something for that area to kind of get it going again. And he's like, we have all this resource that's just kind of laying out here and nobody's using it, and it could be a source of wealth, and that's kind of why they're trying to do this.
So it sounds like it's going to be good for the environment in Minnesota, but talking about permitting and then the spray that's going to go on the pig iron and stuff brings to mind environmental impacts for North Dakota. And was that mentioned at all in
Yeah,
all of this?
yes. So they'll have, I guess, 60% less emissions than comparable facility is what they're saying. I mean,
Okay.
other people can, certainly look into this too as well. I'm just looking at the story from what we get right now.
Right.
If you want to, it's kind of hard to do a story about a huge project and then kind of hone down on one aspect of it. But I did talk to them a little bit about that, and the ability to sequester carbon on site. So that's one thing that's a benefit for what they'll do. That's going to reduce the carbon emissions quite a bit. So from what I understand and what I was told, it's going to be a pretty environmentally friendly facility. I think a big concern would be the ore that's laying out there and whether that dust would blow off.
Hmm.
Uh, and that seems to be something they've thought a lot about. So they're going to spray that coating on it once it comes off the trains, off the cars. Once it goes out into that, it's kind of a long row that they'll draw from. It'll get that coating. They'll wet it down and then it will get that coating right away so that it will stay and not blow around.
It's really interesting. I wonder how things like that are developed. The whole science behind that, I think, again, is fascinating. But it's good to hear that they have taken some environmental considerations, because North Dakota is such a beautiful state. I'd hate to see it damaged.
Yeah, no, I think as far as emissions, it would, I don't think that's going to be a huge amount of emissions as far as from, what I know right now. But I think that's worth exploring as well too, if we want to do a separate piece on that, or it's a worthy question.
So again, coming back to to pig iron and why it's so important, it was interesting for me to learn that we 100% rely on other countries for this. But, it's very important for our supplies chain, for our defense and aerospace manufacturing, things like that. So bringing this into the US and having the US be able to provide this ourselves instead of relying on other countries, that sounds like a win.
Yeah, I think I mean from all these tariffs and all these kind of efforts to, reshore manufacturing, that's kind of one reason these tariffs are in place. These kind of opportunities could develop out of that. Over the years, a lot of the steel industry had been using scrap iron, and it's, using scrap iron and melting that down, it can be of a lesser quality. So, having something like this that companies, steel companies can tap into for a higher quality steel is important, particularly for those specialty items in, whether they're like a warhead or submarine or kind of aerospace technology, this sort of thing. From what I understand, that's an important aspect of this as well.
Yeah. So I like to ask you from a reporter standpoint, some of the things that you found out while reporting on this. So I'll ask you for this article, what was something that you learned that you didn't know going into it?
I didn't really know much about pig iron. Now I know more, but I mean,
Yeah.
it was a fascinating kind of little trip. I mean, so a lot of times you'll get a press release, you hear a little bit about something, and it's like, okay, what is this? It doesn't sound that interesting. And then, when a company will organize for you to go and actually see things, can be helpful. This was organized by the company and by the Minot chamber there, and they, seeing what's going to happen on the ground is very helpful to picturing the story.
Yeah.
So, and it helps you really understand kind of what's behind it, and what it might mean for the communities that are linked at both ends. And just kind of seeing close up kind of those communities in that area and how they used to be very prosperous and how they've declined. I think that was interesting for me too, and just kind of seeing what this could mean for them. And then also on the other end in Minot, I think it's just cool to see projects like this that will offer very good jobs to people. I think that's important for communities. I mean, just, looking back to where I'm from, where I was from in Illinois, all the farm implement companies that were manufacturing farm implement there in the early 80s kind of left, and just kind of the community just kind of dwindled. It's interesting to see some of these things kind of restart.
Yeah. And I was going to ask something kind of along those lines. We talked about having, the construction and all of the jobs and people that's going to bring in, but those people will leave once the construction is done.
Yeah.
But there will still be hundreds of jobs that stay in the community once this facility is up and running.
Yeah, yeah, no, those will be the estimated 650 jobs, whether they're engineers at the power plant that will be on site for that facility, or at the sorting, the processing part. From what I understand, they'll all be very well-paying jobs. So,
Hmm.
and talking to them, they're looking for partnerships with different colleges and other organizations in the communities around, not just Minot, but Bismarck State College could have some curriculum added, according to Jim Bogalis, who was talking about something like that. So these things can lead to other things and other jobs and other kind of opportunities as well. It's kind of a multiplier. Um,
Yeah.
when something like this leaves, it's in the other direction. It's a kind of detacher or kind of destabilizer. So I don't think there's, there should be questions about facilities like this, but on the whole, I think it's very good for Minot and these communities to have these projects come in and have that activity.
It's always good to see jobs coming in to the community. And it's like you said, high paying jobs too. So that is fantastic. I think that's going to be really good for the Minot area. All right. Thank you, Michael. And if you'd like to read more about this, you can find this article on our website at newscoopnd.org. For the North Dakota News Cooperative, I'm Sabrina Halvorson. This has been The Backstory.